Welcome to Relic of Stories. I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we take our time with history, where every tale is told like we're sitting together, letting the past quietly unfold in front of us. And today, we're looking at something truly fascinating. Ancient maps. Maps that seem to reveal places that, according to what we're told, shouldn't even exist. Some of them appear far too accurate for their time. Others show lands that have vanished from the world entirely, and all of them leave us with more questions than answers. So, settle in, make yourself comfortable. Let the noise of the day drift away, because together, we're going to step into a softer, quieter corner of the past and see what secrets these old maps might still be holding. All right, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Piri Reis Map, Antarctica Before the Ice. In the early 16th century, long before satellites mapped the Earth, and long before Antarctica was recognized as a continent, a mysterious map was drawn that continues to baffle historians and researchers alike. It is known as the Piri Reis Map, named after its creator, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, or Piri Reis. This map, dated 1513, was discovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey. And what it revealed would ignite decades of speculation, debate, and wonder. At first glance, the Piri Reis map appears to be a compilation of known world coastlines. It includes detailed depictions of Europe, Africa, and the coast of South America. But what truly sets this map apart, and what has led to countless documentaries, academic papers, and late-night discussions, is what appears in the bottom portion of the map, a remarkably accurate outline of the northern coast of Antarctica. Not just any depiction, but one that seems to portray the coastline as it would appear without its thick covering of ice, a reality that, based on modern geological science, would not have been visible for thousands of years. How could a map from 1513 show something no one should have known? To understand the true mystery behind the Piri Reis map, we must first understand its creator. Piri Reis was no mere sailor. He was an experienced navigator, a naval commander, and a scholar. He compiled his map using older sources. He claimed around 20 different maps and charts, some of which he attributed to the time of Alexander the Great. Among these were reportedly maps from Arab, Spanish, Portuguese, and even ancient Greek origins. This fact alone already stirs intrigue, as it suggests that ancient civilizations possess geographic knowledge we scarcely understand. What Piri created was not a whimsical guess. His map was drawn with a precision that suggests a deep understanding of navigational techniques. The South American coastline is depicted with an accuracy that rivals much later maps. But again, it is the southern continent that haunts the page. At the time, Antarctica would not be officially discovered until 1820, over 300 years later. Yet, there it was, clearly illustrated in a map that predated telescopes, aircraft, and global exploration. Scientists and historians began to study the map in earnest. In 1960, a U.S. Air Force captain named Arlington H. Mallory took a particular interest in the map and compared it to modern seismic data from Antarctica. What he found was shocking. The map appeared to show the continent's true coastline beneath the ice, something modern science had only begun to uncover with sophisticated radar and sonar technology. How could this be? Mallory's findings were supported by Dr. Charles Hapgood, a historian who would go on to champion a theory of ancient advanced cartography. Hapgood believed that the Piri Reis map was evidence of a lost civilization with highly advanced knowledge of geography, possibly even advanced seafaring and surveying techniques. He presented his theories in his book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. which gained popularity and even the attention of Albert Einstein, who wrote a foreword for it. Hapgood proposed that the map was based on ancient source material created by a civilization that had surveyed much of the world's coastlines before the last ice age. He suggested that this civilization might have existed tens of thousands of years ago, long before any known historical cultures, and that its knowledge had been passed down through generations, ultimately reaching Piri Reis through various intermediary maps. Of course, not everyone agrees with Hapgood's conclusions. Critics argue that the southern continent depicted in the Piri Reis map is simply a misrepresentation of South America's coastline, or a creative addition. Some point out that parts of the map are not as accurate as supporters claim, and that the Antarctic coast does not perfectly align with modern maps. Yet, even skeptics cannot fully explain how such detail found its way onto a map from 1513. The shape and relative placement of the landmass suggest at least an awareness of something in that region. Whether it is Antarctica or not, it is clear that Piri Reis had access to knowledge beyond the scope of his time. Another layer to the mystery lies in the legends and stories passed down through various ancient cultures. The Greeks spoke of Terra Australis Incognita, an unknown southern land. Medieval maps included mythical continents and lands, some of which, like High Brazil or Antillia, vanished with time. Is it possible that some of these myths were based on memories of real, ancient places now lost to us? And then there is the issue of ice. Antarctica is buried beneath miles of glacial ice. According to most scientific estimates, the last time the continent was largely ice-free was more than 6,000 years ago. If the Piri Reis map truly shows the coastline without ice, then it would imply access to data from a time when the Earth looked vastly different. That opens up questions many are afraid to ask. Who created the original maps? And how did they know what the world looked like back then? One theory suggests that during the end of the last ice age, an advanced seafaring people could have mapped coastlines while sea levels were lower. If their knowledge survived the cataclysms that followed, it may have been preserved in ancient libraries or temples, passed from civilization to civilization like a sacred flame. The Library of Alexandria, for example, was rumored to house maps and documents from across the ancient world. Could it have held the originals? Could Phoenician or Egyptian navigators have inherited forgotten knowledge? Could Greek scholars like Eratosthenes or Ptolemy have glimpsed this secret past and translated it into charts lost to time? No one knows. But the implications are staggering. The Piri Reis map stands not only as a historical curiosity, but as a window into a lost world. It challenges our understanding of history and forces us to reconsider the possibility that the past was far more complex, far more connected, and perhaps far more advanced than we are taught. Some researchers have turned to ancient myths for clues. Plato spoke of Atlantis, a seafaring power lost to the sea. Egyptian priests spoke of previous cycles of civilization. In Mesopotamian texts, the Apkallu were beings who taught humanity knowledge of writing, architecture, and navigation after the flood. Could the Piri Reis map be a surviving artifact of that forgotten knowledge? In recent decades, the map has inspired countless theories, from ancient aliens to survivors of lost continents. But perhaps the most chilling theory is also the simplest. Maybe we forgot. Maybe there was a time when humanity reached great heights, only to fall, to burn, and to begin again in darkness. The Piri Reis map, then, is not just a chart, it is a memory. A whisper from the deep past, preserved against all odds, and rediscovered when we were ready to question it. Today you can find replicas of the Piri Reis map in museums and libraries. You can view it online. But what you cannot do is explain it away. It refuses to be ignored. It is an ancient voice, drawn in ink and hide, telling us that the story we know is not the whole story. And as we stare into its faded lines and cryptic coastlines, we are left with a choice: to dismiss it as coincidence, or to listen closer, to dig deeper, and to wonder what else lies buried beneath the ice. Chapter 2. The Vinland Map. Vikings in America. Let us begin with a sheet of parchment. A single, unassuming yellowed sheet, its edges worn, its surface speckled with the faint marks of age. It does not look like it could spark heated debates in universities, museums, and conferences around the world. It does not look like it could make historians raise their voices or shake their heads. Yet, for decades, this map, this so-called Vinland map, has been at the very heart of one of the greatest historical controversies of the modern era. The Vinland map first emerged into public attention in the early 1960s at Yale University. It was not simply presented as any old relic. It was announced as something extraordinary, something that, if true, would rewrite a key chapter of human history. According to the claims, this was a map drawn around the mid-15th century, before Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, and it appeared to show a part of the world Europeans were not officially supposed to know about at that time. On its pale surface, among the familiar shapes of Europe, Africa, and Asia, there was a strange landmass west of Greenland. Its outline matched a place that we know today as part of the North American continent, and next to it, in neat faded Latin, was a name: Vinland. Now, Vinland was not a new word. It had been mentioned in the Old Norse sagas, tales of Viking voyages and adventures told across centuries. According to those sagas, the Norse explorer Leif Erikson had sailed west from Greenland around the year 1000 and found a land with wild grapes and rich forests. The sagas called it Vinland, and for years many historians considered these stories to be at least partly mythical, a blend of memory and legend. But the Vinland map seemed to offer something entirely different: physical proof, drawn centuries ago, that Europeans had known of North America long before Columbus. When Yale announced the map's existence in 1965, it was nothing short of sensational. Newspapers splashed the news across their front pages. Headlines spoke of Vikings reaching America. Television and radio hosts discussed it with excitement. And for many people, it felt like the thrill of watching a long-standing historical mystery finally solved. But even in that first wave of excitement, doubts began to form. Where had this map been all these centuries? Why had it never been mentioned before? Why did it surface in the hands of rare book dealers in Europe, rather than being preserved in a known medieval collection? The story of its origin was, and still is, tangled and uncertain. The Vinland map had allegedly been bound together with a medieval manuscript, the Tartar Relation, a work from around 1440 describing the Mongol Empire and Asia. Somehow, according to the tale, this pairing had been separated from its original setting, changing hands quietly until it reached Yale through a private sale. But the path it had taken was full of gaps and unverified claims. In the world of rare documents, such uncertainty is a warning sign. Yet the map itself, to those who believed in it, offered compelling details. Its lines were thin, drawn with care. It labeled lands in a Latin style consistent with the 15th century. It portrayed Greenland as an island, which was not widely understood at that time, and included Vinland far to the west. How could a forger in the 20th century, without modern maps, have drawn such accurate features, believers asked? For a time, this question kept the mystery alive, but then the scientific tests began. In the 1970s, researchers analyzed the ink under microscopes and with chemical tools. What they found shocked many. The ink contained a modern chemical compound called anatase, a form of titanium dioxide not known to be used before the 20th century. To skeptics, this was proof the map was a fake, drawn sometime after 1920. But others argued the tests were flawed, that the anatase could have formed through natural aging or through contamination during later handling. And so, the debate raged. Each decade brought new examinations, new studies, and new voices in the argument. In the 1980s, further ink analysis again pointed to modern origins. In the 1990s, historical linguists examined the Latin used in the labels and found certain word forms that seemed unusual for the 15th century. Yet, there were still respected scholars who defended its authenticity. They pointed out that the coastline of Greenland, as drawn on the Vinland map, was remarkably close to its actual shape, more accurate than many verified maps from the same era. Was that the work of a lucky guess, or of knowledge that had survived from the Norse voyages to the west? Meanwhile, the legend of Vinland itself had gained firmer historical ground. In 1960, around the same time the map surfaced, archaeologists in Newfoundland, Canada, had uncovered the remains of a Norse settlement at L'Anse-aux-Meadows. Here were the ruins of turf houses, iron-working tools, and artifacts unmistakably linked to Greenlandic Norse culture. This site proved, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Vikings had reached North America nearly 500 years before Columbus. The Vinland map was no longer the only piece of evidence, but it remained the most visually striking, the most dramatic. Yet in 2021, Yale University itself seemed to close the door on the debate. A comprehensive scientific review of the ink, using modern methods far more precise than those of the 1970s, concluded that the map's black lines had indeed been drawn with modern ink. They declared it a forgery, likely created in the 20th century to resemble a medieval document. For many, that was the final word, but for others, the feeling remained that the truth might still be more complicated. Because whether the map is a fake or not, the story it tells is not entirely false. The Norse did sail to Vinland. They did explore its coasts. They did bring back tales of a rich land far from their frozen homes. And perhaps somewhere, in some forgotten chest or archive, there may still lie a genuine medieval map that records their journeys, one that has not yet been discovered. Today, the Vinland map sits in its case, no longer displayed as a proud treasure, but as an object lesson in caution. It is studied not only for what it might reveal about medieval exploration, but for what it teaches us about human hope, ambition, and the hunger to believe in discoveries that change everything. In its lines, whether genuine or forged, people see the echo of sails on the horizon, the creak of wooden ships in the wind, and the pull of lands unknown. And perhaps that is why, even after the scientific verdict, the Vinland map still has its hold on the imagination. Because sometimes the power of a story is not only in its truth, but in its ability to make us look out at the edge of the map and wonder what might be waiting there. Chapter 3. The Zeno Map, a phantom island in the North Atlantic. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the open sea. The kind of sea where you can sail for days and see nothing but water and sky. No coastline, no familiar lighthouse, only the horizon, unbroken and infinite. In the 14th century, that was the world between Europe and Greenland, a place as mysterious as the far side of the moon. It was in this uncertain space that the Zeno map appeared, a strange, haunting chart of the North Atlantic, said to have been drawn by two Venetian brothers, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno. These men were not sailors in the traditional sense. They came from Venice, a city famous for its merchants, not for daring voyages into icy northern waters. Yet, according to a story told many years later, They traveled far from their Mediterranean home and found themselves among the islands of the far north, in lands of rugged cliffs, deep fjords, and, most curiously, islands that no longer exist. The map itself surfaced in 1558, long after the voyages it claimed to record. It was published in Venice by a descendant of the brothers, a man named Niccolo Zeno the Younger. He said he had found a collection of old letters written by his ancestors in the 1390s and 1400s, along with a map they had drawn. In these letters, the elder Zenos described a journey that began when Niccolo was shipwrecked on an island called Friesland. Now, here is where the mystery deepens. Friesland is one of the great phantom islands of history. It appears on many maps from the 16th and 17th centuries, often as a large, triangular landmass somewhere between Iceland and Greenland. But today, there is no island there. Modern charts show nothing but open ocean. So, what was Friesland? Was it a mistake, a confusion with Iceland or the Faroe Islands? Or was it a real place now swallowed by the sea? According to the Zeno letters, Niccolo was rescued by the local ruler of Friesland, a man called Zichmni. Zichmni, they claimed, was a powerful sea captain who ruled not only Friesland but other nearby islands. Antonio Zeno later joined his brother, and together they served Zichmni in a series of voyages, exploring lands even farther to the west. They spoke of sailing to islands with fertile soil and strange wildlife, and to places locked in ice where the sea was choked with drifting flows. Some accounts even hint that they may have reached the coast of North America decades before Columbus, perhaps even before the famous voyages of the Norse to Vinland. But here is the problem. Historians have long debated whether any of this actually happened. For one thing, the Zeno map is riddled with oddities. It shows Friesland as a major island, yet no such island exists. It depicts other lands, Estotaland, Icaria, and Drogeo, that also cannot be found today. It places Greenland far too close to Europe, with shapes and coastlines that do not match reality. Some scholars argue that the brothers may have combined bits and pieces of real places with sailors' tales and sheer imagination. And then there is the possibility that the whole thing was a fabrication. Some have suggested that Niccolo Zeno the Younger, living in an age of fierce competition among European nations for claims of discovery, might have created the map to give Venice a share in the glory of early exploration. By proving that Venetians had sailed into the North Atlantic long before the Spanish or Portuguese, he could elevate his city's prestige. If that was his goal, he succeeded, at least for a while. For nearly 2 centuries, the Zeno map was taken seriously. Cartographers copied it, adapting its strange islands into their own charts. Friesland in particular became one of the most persistent phantom islands in history, appearing in atlases well into the 1700s. Sailors even reported sighting it, describing coasts and harbors that could never be found again. Perhaps these were mistakes born of fog and storm, or perhaps they were tales told in taverns to impress listeners. Over time, though, the truth began to catch up. By the late 18th century, as the North Atlantic was mapped in greater detail, Friesland and the other Zeno islands quietly disappeared from new charts. No one had ever landed on them. No one had found their shores. They slipped away into legend. Yet, despite this, the Zeno map remains a fascinating artifact. It captures a moment in history when the edges of the known world were blurry, when maps were not just guides, but invitations to imagine. It reminds us that exploration was not only about finding new lands, but also about shaping the stories we tell about those lands. The Zeno brothers, if their voyages were real, might have been witnesses to places now lost to time. Or perhaps they were dreamers, drawing islands that existed only in the mist between truth and myth. Even now, when we know the coordinates of nearly every rock in the ocean, part of us still wonders about Friesland. Could it have been a volcanic island that sank beneath the waves? Could it have been a mischarted corner of the Faroes or Iceland? Or was it nothing more than a name on a map, a trick of ink and imagination? What we do know is this. The Zeno map, with its phantom islands and puzzling coastlines, is more than just a relic. It is a reminder of the age when sailors set out not knowing what lay ahead, when every horizon promised either discovery or disappointment. And perhaps in that sense, Friesland still exists, not on the sea charts, but in the part of the human mind that longs for there to be something just beyond the edge of the map. Chapter 4. The Carta Marina, Sea Monsters and Forbidden Shores. Let us turn the page of history to the year 1539, when Europe was still a place of deep wonder and fear, when the oceans were vast, uncharted wildernesses, and men spoke of the sea in the same breath as they spoke of magic. Maps in that time were not just tools for navigation. They were works of art and declarations of belief. They told not only of lands and waters, but of the things people thought lived there. And in that age, no map captured the strange marriage of knowledge and imagination more vividly than the Carta Marina. Created by Olaus Magnus, a Swedish priest and scholar, the Carta Marina was unlike anything the world had seen. It was a massive, detailed map of Scandinavia and the surrounding seas, but it was far more than a chart of coastlines and ports. It was a tapestry of stories. Every inch seemed alive with motion. Ships crossing dangerous straits, mountains rising from remote islands, and above all, the creatures. Those sea monsters, so carefully drawn, were not decoration. To Olaus Magnus, they were warnings. To understand why the Carta Marina is so strange, you have to remember the mindset of the 16th century. The oceans beyond familiar shores were feared like the edge of the world had been feared in earlier centuries. Sailors told tales of seeing strange shapes in the waves, hearing unearthly cries on still nights, and watching the surface of the sea break with something far too large to be a whale. These were not mere campfire stories to them. In their minds, the ocean was a living thing, and it guarded its secrets well. Olaus Magnus collected these accounts from fishermen, merchants, and sailors who had ventured into the far northern waters. He heard of the monstrous sea serpent said to dwell near Bergen, so long it could wrap around a ship and drag it under. He heard of the giant lobster-like creature that could snap a vessel in two with its claws. He even recorded stories of a whale so enormous that sailors once mistook it for an island and anchored upon its back, only to perish when it submerged. And when he set pen to paper, he gave each of these beings a place upon his map, as though they were as real as any harbor or fjord. When you look at the Carta Marina, you see that the sea monsters are not drawn in the margins as playful illustrations. They roam the open waters, lurking near coastlines, swimming between trading routes, almost as if they are part of the geography itself. For Olaus Magnus, they were. He believed they were part of the world a sailor must understand if he hoped to survive. One of the most fascinating things about this map is how it blends fact with legend. The land masses are surprisingly accurate for their time. The fjords of Norway, the islands of Iceland, the sweeping shape of the Scandinavian peninsula, all rendered with skill and care. But between those recognizable features are the unknowable depths, and in those depths, myth reigns. The Carta Marina reminds us that in the 16th century, cartography was as much about storytelling as it was about measurement. This map is more than an artifact. It is a window into the human mind of the Renaissance, a time when science and superstition still held hands. When a mapmaker might note the position of a trading port and, in the very next stroke of his pen, draw a kraken in the same waters. It tells us that people did not see the line between what was proven and what was believed as clearly as we see it now. To them, both belonged on the same page. We might be tempted to dismiss the sea monsters of the Carta Marina as pure fantasy. But consider this. Many creatures we know today as real were once dismissed as sailors' tales. The giant squid, now documented by scientists, was long thought to be myth. The oarfish, an enormous serpent-like fish, matches some old descriptions of sea serpents. In this light, the Carta Marina feels less like a collection of falsehoods and more like an old record of encounters, distorted by fear and retelling, yet still holding seeds of truth. The forbidden shores on the map are just as fascinating as the monsters. Certain coastlines are drawn in shadow or labeled with warnings. Some lands were marked as unreachable or dangerous due to treacherous waters or hostile inhabitants. For a map created in an age of exploration, these were not simply blank spaces. They were boundaries of the known world. They were lines that said, "Here is where human knowledge stops and mystery begins." Imagine holding this map in the 16th century, spreading it across a table lit by a single candle. Your eyes would wander from the familiar outlines of your homeland to the strange beasts beyond. You might trace your finger along a sea route to a port you had heard of, only to stop where the inked coils of a serpent rose from the waves. Would you dare to sail there knowing what the map told you? Or would you turn back before reaching those waters? This is what the Carta Marina did. It was not only a guide, it was a test of courage. For centuries the map was forgotten. The original was lost to time, and only much later did copies and reproductions bring it back into the light. Today it hangs in museums, studied by historians and artists alike, admired for its beauty as much as for its strangeness. It is both a masterpiece of cartography and a reminder of the sea's hold on the human imagination. When we look at it now, in our age of satellites and GPS, it can be hard to feel that same mixture of fear and wonder. We can scan the ocean floor, chart every current, and name every island. Yet, something about the Carta Marina makes us pause. Perhaps it is because even with all our knowledge, the ocean still keeps secrets. We still discover new species in its depths. We still lose ships without explanation. And deep inside, we still imagine what might be swimming far below, beyond our sight. The Carta Marina is more than a map. It is a conversation between humans and the unknown. A record of the moment when explorers and dreamers stood on the edge of certainty and peered into mystery. It tells us that the world is not only what we can measure, but also what we can imagine. And in that sense, the sea monsters of Olaus Magnus have never truly left the map. They live on in our stories, in our fascination with the deep, and in the quiet unease we feel when we stare out at the endless horizon. So, when you see the Carta Marina, remember this. It was never just a chart of where to go. It was a map of where the mind dared to wander. And sometimes, that is the greatest journey of all. So, let's start with Chapter 5, the Da Vinci World Sketches, Hidden Lands and Shifting Continents. Leonardo da Vinci. The name itself is enough to summon images of flying machines, painted smiles, and notebooks full of mysterious diagrams. But what if I told you that among his endless sketches, scattered between the mechanical inventions and anatomical drawings, there are strange little maps, rough, almost playful outlines, that some say show parts of the world no one should have known about in his time. It is easy to think of Leonardo as a man of the Renaissance, and he was. But he was also, in many ways, a man ahead of it. He thought of ideas centuries before they were possible. He studied the flight of birds with the intensity of a scientist. He imagined submarines, tanks, and helicopters when such things were barely dreams. And somewhere in those restless hands, he also sketched shapes that look a lot like continents. We need to set the stage. It is the late 15th century. Europe is just beginning to stretch its reach beyond the known world. Columbus has sailed west. Rumors swirl about new lands across the Atlantic. But the maps of the time are still uncertain, more guesses than truth in many places. This is the world Leonardo lived in, a world just starting to redraw itself. In some of his surviving notebooks, there are small drawings that at first seem unremarkable. A curve here, a shaded coastline there. But when researchers began to look more closely, some noticed that these shapes resembled continents as we know them today. And not only the ones known to Europeans in his lifetime. A few appear to suggest outlines that match parts of South America, or the Antarctic coastline without ice. Others seem to imply a shifting, moving Earth, as though Leonardo believed the continents were not fixed. Now, here is where the story gets strange. The theory of continental drift, the idea that the continents move over time, would not be proposed in any serious way until the early 20th century, hundreds of years after Leonardo lived. How could a man of the 15th century even hint at such a thing? Was it a guess, a leap of imagination, or did he know something the rest of the world had forgotten? Some say Leonardo might have had access to older maps, relics from ancient civilizations whose own knowledge of the world was greater than we assume. Maps like the Piri Reis chart, created in 1513, which seemed to show parts of Antarctica without ice, have fueled the belief that fragments of a lost global understanding survived into the Renaissance. Could Leonardo have seen something similar? Could his mind, so quick to absorb and reimagine, have captured those shapes in his own hand? And yet, there is another possibility, one that fits his nature well. Leonardo was endlessly curious about patterns in nature. He saw connections where others saw only chaos. He compared the branching of trees to the flow of rivers, the muscles of the human body to the layers of the earth. Perhaps in studying water currents, in sketching coastlines he knew, he began to imagine how they might change if the land shifted. Perhaps his sketches were not based on secret maps, but on his own theories, centuries before science would catch up. It is important to remember that Leonardo's mind worked like a tide, flowing between fact and speculation. He was not afraid to fill the spaces between what was known with what might be. In this way, his world sketches are like the dreams of a cartographer, visions of a planet in motion, an Earth alive, shifting beneath our feet. Some of these drawings show small globes, not flat maps. Tiny spheres with shaded edges, marked with faint lines that could be coasts or mountain ranges. To the casual eye, they might mean nothing, but to those who look longer, they suggest an understanding of the Earth as a whole, not just the parts mapped by European sailors. This is perhaps the most remarkable thing about them. In an age when many still clung to the idea of a flat or limited world, Leonardo seemed to see the planet in its entirety. And then there are the whispers, the quiet claims from a few researchers that these sketches line up uncannily with certain modern projections of the Earth's geography. They argue that Leonardo could not have drawn them so accurately without some reference. If true, that would mean he held knowledge not rediscovered until centuries later. Knowledge that must have come from somewhere, or someone. But here is the heart of the matter. Leonardo never explained these sketches. They are scattered in the margins of notebooks, side by side with mechanical diagrams and lists of expenses. He did not label them with grand claims or write essays to explain his meaning. They remain silent, leaving us to guess whether they were serious attempts at mapping or simply visual experiments. That silence is part of the mystery. It allows the imagination to wander. Was Leonardo privately studying maps from distant lands? Did he have friends among sailors or merchants who had seen more of the world than they dared to tell? Did he imagine voyages not yet made, sketching in anticipation of discoveries to come? The man himself would have enjoyed our questions, I think. He lived in questions. He thrived in that space between knowing and wondering. And so, we are left with pages that may contain the earliest hints of continents drawn before they were known, or nothing more than the drifting shapes of a genius at play. Today, historians still debate the meaning of the Da Vinci world sketches. Some dismiss the connection to hidden lands entirely, seeing them as artistic exercises with no intended accuracy. Others see too much coincidence in the way the lines curve and the forms take shape. And so, like many things Leonardo touched, they live in that strange half-light between history and myth. Whether they are evidence of secret knowledge or simply the restless creations of an extraordinary mind, the sketches tell us one thing clearly. Leonardo da Vinci saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. He drew not only the present, but the possible. And perhaps, just perhaps, he also drew the forgotten. And that brings us to the end of tonight's journey. If this story kept you company, eased your mind, or helped you drift into a gentler place, then I'm truly glad you were here. This is what Relic of Stories is all about, bringing the echoes of the past to life in a way that feels safe, calm, and timeless. If you've found comfort here, if these stories help you sleep, inspire your imagination, or simply make the world feel a little softer, I'd love for you to stay a while. You can do that by subscribing so you never miss the next tale we uncover together. Until then, may your dreams be peaceful, your nights be quiet, and your heart be light. Good night, and I'll see you in the next story.